We're short of domestic supplies of gas. You know that. You've seen the bills explode. Gas for your heating, for your stove, for generating electricity. I mean, this is important stuff. Real quality of life stuff for millions of Australians. And we'd be a lot better off if we let developers get the gas from the huge Narrabri basin in New South Wales. And the company Santos wants to do just that. But there's a problem. There's a hitch. The ABC, national broadcaster, is clearly backing a challenge to that development by about 160 people claiming to be the traditional owners of that area. Their claim is in fact not yet been accepted, if it will ever be accepted. And they're using a blend of sort of tribal earth worship, a blend of that with modern global warming religion, to argue in the Native Title Tribunal that this development is not in the public interest because of the global warming gases.
We've got our air, we've got our water, all of that. It's one big major source of life, and they're just happy just to drill through it.
Well, in fact, all of us, whatever race we are, we all want more than just air and water. A little bit of energy would make life much easier as well. Joining me is National Senator Matt Canavan, a former Resources Minister. Matt Canavan, always great to hear you. How much do we need this gas from the Narrabri Basin?
Well, it's a life or death situation for us in this country, Andrew. We desperately need more gas to fill the shortages we're seeing. We saw shortages of gas this winter, which nearly caused our power system to go down. And things are only going to get worse next winter when the massive Liddell coal-fired power station shuts. That will mean we'll need more gas to produce electricity to replace that coal-fired power station. And so this particular development, the Narrabri development, would meet about 10% of Eastern Australia's gas demands. It's a significant amount. It would help fill those gaps emerging. Now, this has gone on for far too long. It's now running into its 12th year, so most children in Australia would go through primary and secondary schools, do their whole schooling education, the length of time this project has taken just to go through approvals.
This is just ridiculous. Millions need it, and a group of activists can hold it up. I just can't believe it. Now, Matt, you and I have both seen various land use tribunals, Ministry of Appeals tribunals, etc., use the global warming religion, as has a particular judge in the federal court whose name is seared in my brain, as an excuse to rule against or moderate or handicap various projects involving gas or oil or coal on the grounds of global warming. Having seen what they've done, have you got any hope that the Native Title Tribunal will say, no, this is okay, the gas project can go ahead?
Well, it's just our judicial system's a bit of a lottery at the moment, unfortunately. You mentioned Justice Morty there, and yes, he had a novel interpretation of the law. And,
wasn't that obvious?
And that was overturned. It was overturned on appeal. So it's a little bit of a pot luck at the moment, because some of our judiciary seem intent on legislating from the bench. The regulations and policies surrounding our carbon emissions should be left to our elected representatives, not unelected, unaccountable judges. Their job is to interpret the law. So that's all I hope that the National Native Title Tribunal do. Now, the National Native Title Tribunal obviously has to apply the native title laws, not our climate change laws, not our greenhouse gas laws. I've got great respect for Indigenous heritage and culture, and I do think if the Gomeroi people have a legitimate native title claim, then Santos does need to sit down with them. And some of the reasons we're in this gas mess that we are politically is because gas companies have chosen to litigate rather than negotiate with farmers and native title owners. So if that's the case, if they've got a legal right, that should be maintained. But they should not be able to parlay some quasi-native title right to somehow then start making decisions on carbon emissions policy, as you say, from 160 people for all of us.
Well, it strikes me that a lot of activists in this country wish a very comfortable life, but not the means by which we actually produce it, fund it. That's one issue for me. Just quickly, Matt Canavan, I've been fascinated by the various reactions to the death of the Queen. I've talked about some of the haters. But in Hong Kong, something very inspiring. There has been a queue so long there, that so long that to film it means having to go fast forward, of Chinese citizens outside the British Embassy wanting to pay their respects to the Queen who once ruled over this British colony. And I find it quite astonishing because, like I say, this is a former British colony now taken over by the communist regime. It seems to me that this is in a quiet way a protest, a demonstration asking for the freedom that the Chinese communist regime has now crushed in the city I used to live in.
It's inspiring scenes, Andrew. You might recall that during the Hong Kong protests before COVID, some of those protesters put up Union Jacks into the Hong Kong Legislative Assembly, showing their desperation for the kind of rights that most countries in the former Commonwealth enjoy. And it also doesn't it just completely blow up this leftist response in Western countries that somehow the Queen represented racism and imperialism and colonialism at its worst, when you've got, as you say, former colonies, people in those former colonies showing spontaneous acts of love and admiration for that same Queen. And to me, it demonstrates how the Queen represented some old universal values of sacrifice, of duty, of loyalty, of honesty and integrity. And one of the reasons I think everybody's so sad, and those thousands of people in Hong Kong are sad, is because we are, deep down, we think we might never see that kind of leader again. The world has changed so much since the Queen was coronated, and there's a big question of will we have someone like her grace our presence once more.
Well, I think that's absolutely correct. There's a cultural change, and I'm not sure it's for the better in some respects. Matt Canavan, thank you so much indeed for your time.